this exercise here is 7F. It's on the idea of superannuation. We have already discussed the idea of what an annuity is. It was one of your exercises. So what is it? It's when you regularly put money into an account to reach a future value. Now in Australia, because we're a responsible first world country, the government tries to make sure that everyone, when they retire, they have some money saved up. That's superannuation. In America, they call it like a 401k or something. You're supposed to organize it yourself. Here in Australia, it's legally, if you're working, right? And this is the situation here. It changed in 2022. Before, there was very specific conditions. Now, if you're under 18, you need to work more than 30 hours per week to get super. But then everyone else, if you're over 18 and you work at all, you're supposed to get super. That changed recently. Before, it was very limited conditions. And what do you look for? So all that white stuff is blocked because it's got my address and everything. But if you're being paid super, you're going to see something on your pay slip that looks like that. Okay? 11% on top of your salary. So it's not part of your salary. They're not taking, let's say my salary was 100 grand. They're not taking 11% of that and putting it into super. It's 11% on top of that 100 grand. That's supposed to be going into your super for when you retire. Okay? So if you are under 18 and you worked over 30 hours and you don't see something like this pop up, you need to ask some freaking questions, okay? Because that's your money that you're not getting, and I see it too many times happen where people aren't getting what they're supposed to, okay? And your workplace might go, oh, sorry, we didn't realize that the rules changed and stuff, but it's the number one thing that they try to get away with because you're not aware. You're aware now, okay? Under 18, how many hours?
30.
Good. Anyone over 18? Doesn't matter how many hours. If you're working and you're over 18, you're supposed to get super. Okay? Other people's pay slips might look a little different. It might say what your superannuation fund is. So the top superannuation funds in Australia, these are the rankings. So what is that? What is the ranking for? It's like how much money they earn for you. Okay? So Australian Super is the best. When I worked at the casino for a while, I was with Host Plus. I was pretty happy with those. Unfortunately, if you work as a teacher, you don't get a choice. They just chuck us with the one that the government is and doesn't do very well. It's not even on the list, okay? So I just have to deal with that. Question?
Can you just change it?
The only time I can change it is if I leave this employment, okay? And also, if you haven't been tracking what your super fund is, right, you've probably got a whole bunch of super in different funds. That's your money, and if you don't bring it all together at your current job, you're probably going to lose it all. So there's a website online that lets you consolidate it, bring it all into one. So I highly suggest, like after I finish the recording, if you wanted to talk about that, we can talk about it. Okay? I can even check out your pay slips to see if you think you should have earned super and you didn't. Okay? So in Australia, when you earn an income, your employer currently pays an extra 11%. Your textbook is kind of old. It says 9.5%. So for your maths in your textbook, you're going to be using 9.5, but did you see in my payslip it's 11%? We can't leave that solid because literally last year it was 10.5. It changes all the time. Okay? So if you've got a question in your exam that's about super, it'll tell you the percentage. You don't need to write it down. You're only going to be able to access the super money in your superannuation fund when you retire. And what's the purpose of it? It's so that you can live off of that money when you're no longer working. There are some limited situations you can access your super money before you retire. Do you remember in COVID? They allowed people to grab 10 grand twice over from their super. The only problem with that is taking 10 grand, it might not sound like much, but over the course of the time that you would have earned that, that's like hundreds of thousands of dollars you'd lose if you took it out. So they don't recommend taking out your super, but they gave you the option. And what is a super fund? A super fund is a giant pool of money from all the people with that fund that the people in charge of the super fund try to grow on your behalf. So they invest all of that money on shares, in property, etc. They're trying to make it bigger so that when you retire, you got even more money, right? For our purposes, we cannot simulate that. I haven't taught you how money gets invested in property or bloody crypto, that sort of thing. So we're going to just pretend that the super fund grows by compounding interest, because I have taught you that. It's TVM solvent. So things to remember when you're dealing with the super fund. This is where your notes start. You're regularly going to put a percentage, 9.5% in your book, 11% in real life, of your income into your super fund. The super fund is simulated as a compound interest annuity, and the super fund grows due to regular contributions, the PMT, and also due to compound interest to a certain FV over time. So get that, things to remember, and we'll do this example of Dean being 20 years old, doing his first job, earning 52,000. So give you like 5 minutes. Can you get that in blue so that we can do an example? Second half of this lesson gets a little morbid though, because what you're pretending to do is you're going to live off of that money until you die. So you can plan to live to, say, 90, or if you want to spend big, you can plan to live to 80 or 70. Your earnings will be higher. You can YOLO it and plan to just live to 60. But this question is about you working and saving up for retirement. The second question is about what happens after you retire and you live off of that. There's two halves to these superannuation questions. If anyone is working in hospitality, I do recommend Host Plus. I was very happy with them. If you get a choice. Couple of minutes and we'll do Dean. One minute and then Dean. Right, Dean's 20. He's starting his first job, full-time work at a department store, earning $52,000 a year. Dean's employer will make quarterly contributions to his super fund. How much will the employer contribute to Dean's superannuation fund each quarter? Normally, in every previous year, I would have done 9.5%, but I showed you what the number is now. What is the superannuation percentage in the current year of 2024? 11%. So let's make it realistic. How am I going to work out how much the employer is putting into his super account each quarter. How much is he earning per year?
52,000.
Good. But how many quarters are there in a year? Good. So we need to go 52 grand divided by 4 first. 52,000 divided by 4 is 13,000. Is that what the employer is putting into his account every quarter? No. They're putting 11% of that in there. So how do I find 11% of that? What's 11% as a decimal? 0.11 times by 13,000 equals 0.11 times by 13,000. So every quarter, your employer is going to put an extra 1430 into your super fund, whatever it is that you chose, on top of your pay that you're getting into your bank. B, how much? Dean's superannuation fund gives 5% compounding quarterly. Find how much money is going to be in that fund when he chooses to retire at the age of 60. It's a compound interest question, so N, I, PV, PMT, FV, PY, and CY. Interest rate. What is the interest rate of Dean's superannuation account? 5. Is this his first job? So is he going to have anything in there to start off with? So PV is going to be 0. What did we just work out is going into his super fund every quarter?
1,400.
Good. What sign would it be?
Negative.
Why? Because it's moving from him into the bank. FV is what we're solving for. We want to see how much it grows to. If it's compounding quarterly and he's putting money in there quarterly, what would PY and CY be? 4. Now we just need to work out N. He wants to retire at the age of 60. How old is he now?
20.
So how many years?
40.
And how many times per year is he paying? So 40 years times by 4, which I believe is 160. You can do the maths in here. Let me show you. 40 times by 4. 160. 5%, 0. He's putting negative 1,430 in each time. 4 and 4. Alpha, enter. So that's telling me that by his retirement, he's going to have $720,493.59 in the fund when he retires. Okay, can you get that example down, please? That is an example of the first half of a superannuation question. Working out how much you will have in the super fund by the time you retire. Is that a question? That's bare minimum. You're allowed to put your own money in as well to make it grow faster. It's recommended to do that. I don't personally. I can't afford. I've got a kid. I need to take care of that. But they reckon if you want to live comfortably when you retire, you should be putting in about an equivalent of 15%. So your workplace takes care of 11. You should try to put in an extra 4% to live comfortably. The problem is that's an old question. That these days that wouldn't be super survivable at age 60. Yeah? It sounds like a lot of money for you, but it's not for an adult. Can you get that example that I've highlighted in blue down? Because we need to do the second half of super, which is pretending that you are surviving on that money until you... Was that face because of the unrealisticness of surviving for you guys? Because I felt the same way when I first learned about this, but what do human beings do? We find a way to survive, okay? I think it's better that you're aware of this so that you can start doing the math now. All right, let's do the second half. This will be in the video anyway if you don't have it. The second half of superannuation questions. Super questions in this subject almost always deal with two aspects of super. The second aspect is withdrawing your superannuation. Okay? The two aspects are depositing into your super fund, which we literally did an example of just above. That was Dean. The thing that we're doing now is putting the contents of your super fund into a pension fund. They call that rolling it over. So almost like pretending Dean grabbed his $493.59, put it somewhere else into like a bank account, and then for the rest of his life he withdraws from that regularly because he's not working anymore. He needs an income somehow. So the pension fund, we usually pretend, is a compounding interest bank account that starts with a large lump sum. What was that? That's the end result of your super fund, and you withdraw payments regularly. So here's another things to remember. The starting principle of the pension fund is what you finished the super fund with. The pension fund is simulated as a compound interest account, and the pension fund shrinks because you're withdrawing from it. But because of compound interest, even though it's shrinking, the compound interest grows it a little bit, and then it shrinks further as you withdraw. Can you get those things to remember? And then we'll do this example with Heather retiring at age 65. A few minutes for that. You know, this rain is technically a car wash now. Technically. Sometimes when money's tight, this is the only car wash you can afford. It's not going to get the brake. All right, let's pretend to be Heather, and then I'll finally shut my mouth. Please be aware, this example is only the second half. SACE likes to ask superannuation questions in the exam, okay? So the SACE questions will be like doing Dean, and then pretending Dean retired and seeing what happens. We're doing two separate ones here, okay? So Heather has just retired at age 65. She has 900 grand in her superannuation fund. She rolls it over into her pension fund, which is compounding monthly at 4% per annum. If Heather withdraws $5,400 per month to live off, how long is it going to take for the money in the fund to run out? Let's do the math. So A, N, I, PV, PMT, FV, PY, and CY. What's the interest rate of Heather's pension fund? Good. 4. PV. She rolled over the contents of her super fund into her pension fund. So what is her pension fund going to start with? Yep, this one starting with a 9. What sign would it be though? Good. So it's going to be negative 900,000. This is where it gets morbid. If Heather withdraws $5,400 per month to live off, what are we saying she's going to end up with in the account? What is she going to finish with by the end of this? 0. And what is it saying that she's withdrawing to live off of? Per month? She withdraws what? 5,400? 5,400. What sign do you reckon that 5,400 is going to be? Good. Why? Because the money is in the bank, but she's taking it out. So she's getting 5,400. That's why it's positive. PY and CY. How often is she doing this? It's compounding monthly and she's withdrawing it monthly. So 12. So we are solving for n because it's asking how long. So let me chuck that into TVM for negative 900 grand, $5,400, end with 0. There's no point having money in the bank because you'll be dead. Alpha, enter. So that's telling me that's not years. What is PY? What is PY? So someone jumped on that and said she could live to an extra 243.68 years. No. You look at PY and CY, that is months. So how would I convert that 243.68 to years if I needed to? Good. So that is 243.68 divided by 12. That's 20.31 years rounded to 2 DP. So that's not bad, but that's quite a short time. Why? Even I don't spend $5,400 a month. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. She's living it up. This Heather lady, wow. And that leads into B. Because when did she retire? 65. If that's going to last 20.31 years, she's going to make it to 85. But here in part B, she wants the money to last until she's 90. So she's being she's going to pull it back a little bit. How much can she afford to withdraw each month? What am I going to solve for this time? Am I solving for N anymore? No, what am I solving for? If it says how much I can withdraw each month. You're solving for PMT. So N is going to be, if she's living till 90 take away 65, she wants to live another 25 years. So N is going to be 25 times 12. So she's doing some life planning here. She wants it to last 300 months. It's the same interest rate. She just wants to spend a little less. PV is negative 900,000. Solving for PMT. So what can I afford to live a bit longer? I don't want to have anything in the account at the end. No one cares how rich you are when you're under the ground. So 300 for 900,000. So now I solve for alpha, PMT, alpha, enter. So that tells me I need to be a bit more conservative. That's quite a lot less per month. So only withdraw $47.50.53 per month for it to last until she is 90. I heard some guys whispering over here about it, and that's a legitimate concern. Is this ignoring something that really happens in real life? Inflation. Okay? So that's not just it. The price of everything's going to go up over time anyway. So you need to keep that in mind as well if you're doing this sort of planning. So can you get that example down? I'm done now. That is superannuation, and that is 7F. What I'll do is for tomorrow, it'll just be a catch-up lesson because next week we'll start your assignment.